How do you sort out the so-called jargon from real-world practices that work? Do the members of your organization find some business or technology advice utterly confusing? Welcome to Real Talk with Sam Holcman. In this program, we set the record straight, and in terms that business people and technology people can understand. Now, here is your host, Sam Holcman.
Welcome to this edition to Real Talk. This is Sam Holcman, and today's topic is the 4 classes of data that artificial intelligence engines are possibly using to train those engines. And we're going to briefly go through those 4 classifications, and I've just named them to make them a little bit easier to understand, and then we'll go into a little bit of detail on each one of these. The first one that you're probably familiar with, of course, is what we refer to as generally available data. And that is data that's on the internet that you can just use a search engine for and put a search engine term in, and all of a sudden some things come up, generally available. The second category is a bit more sensitive, and that is the search engine. When you put in a term, the data that comes up is actually copyrighted. And this is an area of massive concern to those that actually generate that intellectual property, that intellectual capital. And as you probably have seen recently, there are numerous government organizations and private organizations that are quite upset about this. These engines are using this data without compensation, without permission, without attribution. The third category and the fourth category should be of even bigger concern to you that are using these artificial intelligence engines, and those are the ones that require some entry of information prior to receiving that data. So for example, you go to the internet and there's an article or a piece of information that's of interest to you. You're asked for your, let's say, your name or your email address or some identifying information. And from that information is then sent to you. There's actually a sequence going on there. You are looking for information, you are asked for some information, and then you provide that. Well, guess what? Neither search engines or artificial intelligence engines can be trained on that because that information isn't available. And the fourth category, and it's really the most important category, is what we refer to as best practices. And best practices are not the 3 previous categories, but those are the intellectual property, the intellectual capital that various organizations, vendors, consultants, training organizations, universities, et cetera, require to be direct some kind of compensation for. And so that's where the best practices are. Those are neither indexed by any of the search engines. They are behind some kind of a paywall or firewall of some kind, and they require compensation prior to those pieces of information, data, being accessible to you or other people. So as we see here, 3 of the 4 categories that artificial intelligence engines are being trained on are an issue for those of you that are using this information, and as importantly, for the people that are actually using that for training those engines. And as you can see very quickly, 2 of the 4 are not even accessible to these artificial intelligence engines for that training purposes. So in summary, I think the easiest way to put this is caveat emptor. Let the buyer of artificial intelligence solutions or recommendations or understandings beware. Until next time, thank you for listening.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Talk. Be sure to join your host, Sam Holcman, again for another edition of our program. We'll have more real topics of discussion then.